The last dancer of the valleys arrived when everyone had already given up. A man of mysterious past, eyes that carried stories of pain and redemption. When the drought threatened to destroy the small town, he found salvation in the ancient underground, tunnels that no one expected. Between broken promises and new beginnings, a story of courage and hope blossoms in the desert. Get ready for a journey that will touch your soul. Leave your like, subscribe, and comment where you are watching from. At the break of dawn, when the wind whispered forgotten promises on the red sand dunes, Dryville awoke under the sun's merciless gaze. The adobe and wooden houses creaked, and fine dust covered everything like a constant shroud. It was a place forged in resilience, where life clung to the earth with the stubbornness of a cactus. Arnold, his 40 years marked more by experience than time, arrived without fanfare. His horse, as dusty as he was, seemed more an extension of the landscape than a living being. Arnold's eyes, a deep gray blue, swept the horizon like a hawk searching for prey. But what he sought was a fragment of the past that stubbornly haunted him. Guilt, a silent beast, gnawed at his insides since the premature departure of his brother, Richard, years ago. Richard spoke of secrets hidden beneath the ground, of a promise of abundance that Arnold, in his skeptical military youth, had ignored. Now that legacy of veiled words was all that was left to him, a faint beacon in the darkness of his solitude. That slight limp, a remnant of a past conflict, was a physical reminder that life always demanded its price, and he felt that the price of his own life was intrinsically linked to the debt he owed to his brother's memory. He dismounted in front of the only general store on the main street, the smell of old leather, dry grains, and some withered hope hanging in the hot air. It was there that goods arrived, that news spread, and where perhaps he would find the first lead that had brought him there. Clara, in her early 30s, with the contained liveliness of someone who had learned to be self-sufficient, watched the newcomer from the general store's doorway. Her brown hair was pulled back tightly in a bun, practical for the daily routine under the sun. Her hands, though calloused from work, moved with an elegant efficiency as she adjusted sacks of flour. 2 years had passed since winter had taken her husband, Peter, leaving her alone with the business and the task of keeping the flame of hope burning in Dryville. Her determination was not ambition, but the visceral need to protect her space, her independence in a world where being a woman and alone meant being a target. She saw the caution in Arnold's movements, the way his eyes scanned the village, and recognized the loneliness in him. Loneliness different from hers, older, more deeply rooted. Old James, the blacksmith, with his 70 years and back bent over the anvil, watched the same scene from his smoky workshop. The clang of metal against metal was the soundtrack of his life, a life dedicated to shaping iron and forging wisdom. He only wished for the peace of seeing his last years pass in tranquility, perhaps passing on some of what he knew before the dust took him forever. Arnold felt her gaze, direct, without vain curiosity, just watchful observation. He approached the general store, the creak of the floorboards under his feet breaking the oppressive midday silence. Clara attended to him with polite formality, her sharp eyes evaluating him. "Can I help you with something, stranger?" Her voice was firm, like the edge of a well-honed knife. "I'm looking for information," Arnold replied, his voice grave and low. "Information about what?" "About a man. Richard. He was around here a few years ago. He spoke of water." Clara frowned. The name Richard was not familiar to her. But water? In that land withering under the relentless drought, the search for water was the search for life. She nodded slowly. "Richard, I don't recall, but water is what everyone is looking for. Welcome to Dryville. Although the name says a lot, we hope you find what you need." Her formality was a shield, he realized, and he respected it. He bought some basic supplies, beans, flour, coffee, paid with clean, honest coins, and she handed him the goods with a slight nod. As Arnold loaded the sacks onto his horse, he felt the roughness of the earth under his boots, the same earth that, according to Richard, held a secret. The drought arrived with the fury of an invisible predator. The river, once a source of life and recreation, dwindled to a lament of exposed pebbles under the harsh sun. Cattle wasted away, the earth cracked into open wounds, and the dust, once an annoyance, became an enemy, suffocating the air and covering everything. Tensions exploded when desperate ranchers from the highlands began to dam and divert the trickle of water that still flowed. Upstream, Dryville, downstream, felt the hardest blow. Conversations in the few establishments that still operated became heated, full of complaints and accusations. Arnold, who had decided to stay in the village, following the few clues he found, in the surroundings, found himself in the middle of a dispute that wasn't his, but which resonated with the injustice he knew. "Water is like blood in this land," explained James the blacksmith, as steam rose from the quenching trough. Arnold watched him work, the incandescent metal bending under the precise blows of the hammer. When it starts to dry up, men show their true nature. Some fight, others steal, and many simply wither like the vegetation. Arnold nodded, thinking about how extreme circumstances also shaped people, revealing the core of their strength or weakness, just as fire and the hammer revealed the soul of iron. The approach to Clara began unexpectedly. Arnold was helping a newly arrived family unload a heavy wagon under the hot sun when she appeared with a pitcher of fresh water and 2 glasses. "For helping hands," she said, offering one of the glasses to him. A half smile lit up just one side of her face, a glimmer of light in her usually serious expression, like the moon in its first quarter, promising greater luminosity. Arnold accepted, feeling the coolness of the water go down his dry throat. "Thank you, ma'am." "Clara, and yours?" Arnold. It was a simple moment, a gesture of kindness in the midst of harshness, but it was the first drop of pure water on parched soil, planting a seed of connection. The second significant event came in the form of a cloud of dust on the horizon, announcing the arrival of suited and well-dressed riders, contrasting with the village's rusticity. They were representatives of the Eastern Railway Company, led by a man named Mr. Elias Smith. With an oily smile and polished manners, he gathered the residents in the saloon to present his proposal. Buy land to expand the railway line, bringing progress and prosperity to Dryville. His words were sweet as honey, but his eyes, Arnold noticed, gleamed with the same cold greed he had learned to identify in generals and war merchants. They didn't care about the land itself, but about what it hid. "They didn't come for the land," Arnold commented to James, who was watching the scene with suspicion. "They came for what's beneath it." Arnold's intuition, sharpened by years of caution, triggered an internal alarm. This was the first medium twist. The village was built not just on arid land, but on something valuable to the railway, an underground spring capable of fueling thirsty locomotives for decades. The drought that plagued them was, ironically, the key to the outsider's interest. When Arnold shared his suspicions with Clara, she listened attentively, her astute eyes not missing a word. "My father-in-law, Peter's father, was a man who liked to write everything down," she said. "He spoke of a sacred spring in these valleys, a legend the ancient inhabitants told." She invited him to the general store after closing, and in the damp, cool basement, she took an old ledger from a chest, bound in worn leather. The yellowed pages were filled with careful handwriting, mixing accounts of goods with observations about the weather, the land, and local legends. As they searched, their fingers briefly touched over the paper, an invisible current of electricity running between them. Both drew back, surprised by the unexpected intensity of that accidental contact. It was the second moment of approach, subtle, electrical mutual trust beginning to solidify in the sharing of a secret. As the days passed, Arnold and Clara created an informal ritual. At dusk, when the sun painted the sky with shades of orange and purple, they would meet on the back porch of the general store, protected by the long shadows that created an illusion of privacy. He would tell her stories of distant lands, of towering mountains and rushing rivers, always avoiding the dark details of his military past. She spoke about the seasons she had faced alone, the difficulty of keeping the business going in a place that seemed forgotten, the silent longing for Peter, without mentioning the deep solitude that accompanied her. These conversations, simple and revealing, were the third crucial moment of their approach, building bridges over the turbulent waters of their pasts. A third crucial event occurred when Mr. Smith, seeing that most residents were still hesitant to sell their land, focused his pressure on Clara. Her general store, strategically located in the center of the village, was vital to his plan. He visited her, offering an exorbitant amount, far above the establishment's real value. "Your general store would be perfect for our local office, Miss Clara," he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "With the railway here, this village will flourish. You can secure your future now." Clara, feeling the weight of Arnold's gaze watching her from a distance, felt a strength she didn't know she possessed. Her independence was her most precious asset. "My family built this place, Mr. Smith," she replied firmly. "It's not for sale. Not now, not ever." Her refusal was the second medium twist. The next morning, deliveries of goods destined for Clara's general store began mysteriously disappearing or arriving damaged. Sabotage. The war for water and land had escalated. The summer reached its relentless peak. Dryville's central well, which had once supplied water for everyone, was now just a dry hole, its cracked walls echoing the residents' despair. The air was thick with dust and heat, and the smell of dry earth and sweat permeated everything. The outsiders took advantage of the situation to tighten the siege. Only the Eastern Railway Company had the resources, the technology to drill down to the deep waters. The price? The village's total submission, the sale of all land, the departure of those who didn't serve their purposes. It was at this critical moment that Arnold decided he could no longer wait. The guilt he carried for his brother, the need to fulfill his last promise, and the growing connection with Clara and the people of that village impelled him to act. He showed Clara the faded map he had found with the riderless horse the day he arrived, a simple object of worn leather, but which for him was the distant echo of Richard's voice. "This map was with my brother," Arnold explained. "He drew it based on the legends he heard. It says there's a place to the west, a narrow canyon where water flows under the ground. He called it the wet heart of the desert." The exchange of this significant object was the fourth crucial moment of their approach, a symbol of mutual trust and the sharing of a deep and dangerous secret. During a moonless night, under a sky thick with stars indifferent to the misery on earth, Arnold and Clara followed the map's markings. The air was heavy, the smell of dust mixed with the faint aroma of some wild herb resisting the drought. They reached the canyon, a dark crack in the rocky landscape. The entrance was narrow, difficult to cross. "My brother said the entrance is guarded," Arnold murmured, helping Clara descend through a steep rocky passage. "Guarded by what?" she asked, her voice low and tense. "By the difficulty of finding it, perhaps, or by the dangers it hides." As they descended, a minor rock slide momentarily blocked the path behind them. It wasn't serious, but it left them trapped in a cramped, dark space. The weak light of Arnold's makeshift lantern flickered, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. The smell of wet earth and cold stone filled the air, a welcome contrast to the suffocating heat outside. There, cornered in the belly of the earth, they felt each other's breath, heard their accelerated heartbeats echoing in the silence. It was a moment of shared vulnerability. "I never thought I'd find comfort in the darkness," Clara confessed, allowing herself to lean on Arnold's shoulder as they waited for the path to be cleared. He felt the contained fragility in her, the strength she showed daily yielding for an instant. "Darkness can be a refuge sometimes," Arnold replied, his voice gentle. "When outside the sun burns and people betray." It was the fifth crucial moment of their approach, the mutual demonstration of vulnerability, revealing the invisible scars they carried. What they found beyond the passage was not just a spring, but something that surpassed all expectations. The first major twist in the story: a vast system of ancient tunnels, excavated centuries ago by a forgotten civilization that mastered the art of finding and conducting underground water. Smooth walls, channels carefully carved into the rock, natural reservoirs. There was water there, crystal clear and abundant water, enough for Dryville, for the cattle, and even to transform the desert into a garden, as Richard had promised. The smell of humidity, of fresh earth and latent life was intoxicating. Arnold felt a shiver down his spine. Richard was right. His debt to his brother gained a new meaning. Upon returning to the village with the news, they confronted the third, medium twist. The outsiders had used the drought and fear to convince half the residents to sign contracts selling their land. The village was divided, families and neighbors on opposite sides. Some saw the railway's offer as the only way out of misery, others as a betrayal of the land and the community. During a tense meeting in the saloon, the air thick with distrust, and the smell of alcohol and tobacco, Arnold unrolled the old map on the worn wooden table. "We found water," he said, his voice resonating in the room. "Not a well, but a vast underground system, built long ago. My brother found this. There's enough water for everyone. This land always had life beneath the surface." Explained what they saw in the tunnels, the promise of salvation. His words ignited hope in the eyes of some, but distrust and fear were powerful feelings. Mr. Smith, sitting apart, watched the scene with a thin smile. "Ghost stories and ancient legends," he scoffed. "Meanwhile, the well is dry and thirst grips us. The railway brings reality, money, future, not empty promises and fairy tale maps." Seeing his plan threatened by the discovery, Mr. Smith played his final hand. He approached Arnold after the meeting. "A man with your past should recognize an opportunity for a fresh start," he insinuated with a malicious smile. "I know who you are, Arnold. I know what you did. A generous sum and safe passage away from here. Leave the village with its legends, and the railway with its business. It's best for you." It was a veiled threat, a reminder that his secrets were not safe. This was the first high tension. Arnold felt the inner beast of rage stir, but he controlled it. His loyalty, once focused on military obligations, now fixed on that parched land and the woman who placed her faith in it. The attempted bribe and threat failed, and Mr. Smith's response was swift and brutal. The fourth medium twist, his henchman, led by Big John, a ruthless brute, and One Hand, known for his cold cruelty, began terrorizing the residents who refused to sell. Houses were vandalized, fences torn down, cattle stolen. Fear spread like fire in dry grass. The village became a powder keg, waiting for a spark. Clara, despite the fear, kept the general store open, a beacon of resistance. Her courage inspired some, but also made her a prime target. Arnold began watching over the general store, his silent presence an invisible shield. One night, when One Hand tried to set the store on fire, Arnold intervened. There were no words, just the swift and brutal dance of bodies in the darkness. Arnold, with his military skill and contained fury, defeated One Hand, but not without suffering cuts and bruises. The smell of smoke, sweat, and blood hung in the cold night air. His small victory came at a cost, the certainty that Mr. Smith would stop at nothing. James, the blacksmith, brought up the fifth medium twist. Seeing the situation deteriorate, he sought out Arnold and Clara. "There's more to the map than you saw," the old man said, his eyes tired but full of determination. "The ancients didn't just find the water, they revered it. There were rituals, a sacred place. My father-in-law, who knew the legends, spoke of a symbol engraved in stone that indicated the keystone of the system, the point where the water was purest and the pressure controlled. He believed this point was the key to everything. This information added a layer of mystery and urgency to the search for the tunnels. As Arnold recovered from his injuries in the back room of Clara's general store, the intimacy forced by the situation deepened the connection between them. Clara cared for his wounds with a tenderness that surprised them both. He, for the first time in a long time, allowed himself to be cared for, the guard he constantly maintained, relaxing a little. "Why did you stay?" she asked one night, her voice low. Arnold looked at the dark wooden ceiling. "My brother. He believed in this place, in this water. I disappointed him once. I can't do it again." He didn't mention the burden of guilt, but the emotion in his voice revealed the depth of his pain. It was another moment of vulnerability, the fear and guilt that haunted him exposed, even if indirectly. The sixth medium twist came when Mr. Smith, realizing that brute force wasn't enough to break the resistance of some, used the drought as a weapon. He bought all the water wagons arriving from outside the village, creating a cruel monopoly. Water for those who sell the land, was the message, clear and brutal. Despair grew. Families who had resisted began to yield, seeing their children and animals suffer. The faith of many wavered under the weight of thirst. Arnold and Clara knew time was running out. They needed not only to find the keystone mentioned by James, but also to convince the divided residents to fight together and reactivate the underground system. The task seemed impossible. Distrust was a subtle poison, more dangerous than any weapon. The seventh medium twist. James, remembering more details from his father-in-law's stories, realized that the keystone was not in the main tunnels, but in a secondary branch, known only to the elders and hidden under an ancient indigenous cemetery, considered sacred ground. To get there, they would need permission from the few indigenous peoples who still lived isolated in the nearby mountains. Arnold, accompanied by Clara and James, made the difficult journey to the indigenous camp. They offered gifts, tobacco, tools polished by James, rare seeds that Clara had kept. The leader, a taciturn man named Samuel, listened calmly. He knew the legends of the water and the tunnels, and he knew the greed of the white men. His decision was the eighth medium twist. He agreed to show them the secret passage to the secondary branch, but with a condition that the water be respected, never exploited for profit, but shared with all who needed it, human or animal. It was an ancient code of honor, a reflection of the deep connection of the indigenous peoples with the sacred land. Arnold, who sought redemption for Richard's broken promise, felt the seriousness of the oath. With Samuel's help, they found the entrance to the secondary branch of the tunnels. It was narrower and more dangerous, requiring another demonstration of trust and teamwork between Arnold and Clara. They navigated dark passages, listening to the distant dripping of water. The air became cooler, the smell of moss and damp earth growing stronger. The ninth medium twist occurred when they found the keystone. It wasn't a stone, but a complex structure of carved rocks and channels, a control point for the water flow, sealed for centuries. Reopening it would require not only strength, but knowledge of how the system worked. As they worked to clear the passage, they heard the sounds of pickaxes and distant voices. The second high tension. Mr. Smith's henchmen had discovered the main entrance to the tunnels and were trying to get in, perhaps to destroy the system or take control of it. Time had run out. The moment of greatest danger was rapidly approaching. Arnold and Clara, with the help of James and Samuel, rushed back to the main entrance of the tunnels. Outside, the scorching sun beat down on the earth, but inside the tunnels, the smell of wet earth and fresh air was a reminder of what was at stake. Mr. Smith and his men were at the entrance, trying to break down the heavy stone door that sealed the main passage. The door, sealed by the ancients, was sturdy, but it wouldn't hold forever. The final battle was about to begin, not just for the water, but for the soul of Dryville. The 10th medium twist. Mr. Smith, frustrated by the resistance and the discovery of the tunnels, ordered his men to place dynamite at the entrance. He didn't want the water for the village. He wanted to ensure no one else had it if he couldn't control it. The threat of total destruction hung in the air. Arnold, feeling the urgency and the vibration of the stone walls, knew that defending the tunnel entrance was crucial. He needed help, but many residents were still paralyzed by fear or divided by greed. It was then that Clara stepped forward. "I will," she said, her voice firm. "This is my land, my home. I won't run." James, despite his age, also took his place beside them, holding an old rifle. Some residents who had resisted selling, inspired by the courage of Clara and Arnold, began to join them at the tunnel entrance. Samuel and his men moved like shadows to strategic positions, ready to fight for their sacred land. The third high tension, the dynamite fuse, was lit. A thin thread of gray smoke rose in the hot air. Time was running out, and the sound of pickaxes on the stone door and the smell of sulfur and earth mingled with the rising tension. The battle was inevitable, and the outcome uncertain. The fight erupted. Smith's henchmen attacked the tunnel entrance but were met by the fierce resistance of Arnold, James, Clara, Samuel, and the few residents who joined them. Arnold moved with the brutal efficiency of his soldier days, protecting the entrance, his eyes fixed on the burning fuse. Clara, surprising everyone, handled a shotgun with unexpected skill, protecting his flank. James used his knowledge of the terrain to divert some attackers. Samuel and his warriors with bows and arrows showed the silent lethality of those who knew the land. The 11th medium twist. In the middle of the confrontation, a young resident who had sold his land to Smith, seeing the courage of Arnold and Clara and Mr. Smith's contempt for life and the land, had a moment of regret. He turned against Smith's henchmen, creating a crucial distraction. Arnold saw the fuse burning dangerously close to the dynamite. There was no time to defuse it. The only chance was to explode the charge in a safe location, away from the main entrance, perhaps in a secondary tunnel that wouldn't affect the main water flow. It was a race against time and death itself. He shouted for the others to get back, grabbed the dynamite and ran into a side tunnel, the darkness swallowing him. Clara screamed his name, fear paralyzing her for an instant. Samuel held her back. He knows what he's doing. He dances with danger like the wind dances with the sand. Arnold ran through the dark passages, the sound of his footsteps echoing, the smell of gunpowder growing stronger. He found a side branch, desolate and unstable. This would be the place. He set down the dynamite and ran back, his heart pounding in his chest. The earth trembled with a deafening explosion, a dry boom followed by a rumble of rocks and dust. The smell of sulfur filled the air. The 12th drastic twist. The explosion collapsed the side branch, but the main entrance to the tunnels remained intact. Arnold limped out of the dust covered in grime, but alive. The act of sacrifice, the 5th crucial moment, had solidified the bond between him and Clara, between him and Dryville. He had risked everything for them. Mr. Smith, seeing his plan of destruction thwarted and his men defeated, tried to flee, but was intercepted by Arnold and the remaining residents. His politeness crumbled, revealing the cruel and cowardly man beneath. He was handed over to distant authorities, his Eastern Railway Company exposed for its brutal tactics. With the threat removed, the work of restoring the tunnels began. Arnold, with the knowledge from Richard's map and the legends told by James and Samuel, led the efforts. Clara organized supplies and labor from the residents who had decided to stay and fight for the future. The smell of damp earth and the sound of water dripping and flowing through the ancient channels replaced the dust and silence of the drought. The village, once divided, found a common purpose in the task of bringing the water back. Hope, a delicate flower in the desert, began to sprout. The 13th drastic twist. In restoring the system, they discovered that the keystone not only controlled the flow, but also revealed the true extent of the spring. It was even larger than they imagined, a source of water that could sustain not only Dryville, but the entire region. Richard's dream was not just a legend, it was a vast and generous reality. 6 months passed. The drought finally gave way to the first rains, and the parched earth drank the water thirstily. But the true salvation came from below, from the restored tunnels. The underground channels, cleaned and cleared, began irrigating the lands again, transforming the desert into a verdant valley. The smell of wet earth and sprouting vegetation replaced the smell of dust. The 14th turning point. Dryville, now a village with a promising future, attracted new residents, and commerce flourished. Water brought life, and life brought hope. Arnold found the peace he had sought. The guilt over Richard lessened, replaced by the pride of having fulfilled his brother's promise, of having given life to his legacy. He found a home in that unexpected place, and a future alongside Clara. The love between them grew, strong and resilient like the roots of a desert tree, nurtured by trust, mutual respect, and the courage they shared. They built a life together, no longer defined by their pasts, but by the future they were building side by side. James continued forging his iron, but now with renewed joy, teaching his craft to the young people of the village. Samuel and his people kept watch over the tunnels, ensuring the water was always shared with justice and respect, keeping the memory of the ancients alive. Dryville, which one day seemed doomed to wither, flourished. Faith in the land, faith in the community, and faith in the future brought light to where before there was only shadow and dust. Hope, nourished by water and unity, danced in the valleys like the gentle breeze at the end of the day. And you, at what moment will you let hope bloom in your desert?